Morning. Okay. All right. Well, this is I'm meeting with Fallon. This is our meet and greet. We did meet before, but I wasn't able to get it recorded on my phone on my way home from work. So we are making this the official meet and greet, and so that way it can be uploaded into Go React. So Fallon, I sent you the instrument, and I was wondering if you'd had a chance to look at it and if you had any questions about any of the sections or the competencies and that kind of thing.
So I did briefly go over it, and I mean, I don't have any big questions. Like, it just looks like a normal rubric, but so there's obviously like 1.1 through like 1.3, and then it goes to 2s. So all of those things, like, you're grading me on throughout, or
Throughout.
Is there certain ones identified for certain videos, if that makes sense?
Typically not, but if you look, there's I'm trying to remember if it's 5. I think it's 5, between 5 and 7. There are some competencies in there where you're basically, and I can't say what they are verbatim, but basically you're using ELA skills outside of the classroom. And those are going to be, any of these can be done at any time, but typically those are a little bit more complicated because they're not typically embedded in curriculum. And you almost have to kind of create your own lesson plan to carry those out. So let me illustrate. So one of those, and I'm not saying you should do this, but this is just to kind of give you an idea. Nobody writes letters anymore. Okay. And so when you write a letter, you're teaching the students, depending on if you want them to type it or if you want them to handwrite it, they're using persuasion, they're using formatting, they're using spelling, they're using grammar. They have an audience, so they have a purpose. So that is and then they have, that letter can be sent email, or it can be an email, or it can be sent through the mail. Most students don't even know what a stamp is or how to address an envelope. So that right there, so let's say you found a purpose outside of the classroom. Let's say kids were writing to the local library and they were helping to give a critique or some feedback on some new textbooks or some new books. Okay, so maybe there's reading involved. So they're using their ELA skills and they're using what they're doing, and it's going to an outside purpose. It's not being pinned up on the wall or put on some sort of website. It's going to be addressed in an old-fashioned manner, again, handwritten or whatever. And they slap a stamp on it and they send it out, and it gets mailed to the librarian or whatever. And then what that can do is it takes what they've learned and they put it into a purpose that is technically externally usable for their skills. And then that's just an example. There are lots of them. Some demonstration teachers have had some of their students go read books to an elementary school, if there's one close by. And then they have to write a reflection on what they did. And then they write a thank you message to their buddy that they read the book to, the student, the younger student, and to the teacher that hosted the book reading opportunity. So again, there's something else that can be done in that realm, but sometimes that takes a little bit more planning, and it may end up being towards the end of your student teaching experience.
So that brings up another question. The things on the rubric, I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Is that off of just the videos, or is that overall? Because I was thinking, like, your examples right now, like, let's say I chose to do the library thing, I'm not gonna, but like, do I need to video that lesson, or are you just?
Yes,
Okay.
You do. Yeah. And in there, as you've read through, there's lesson planning, there's classroom management. So there's research, there's use of data. Some of those competencies are going to be, how do I put this in descriptions? internal or before you do any kind of instructional videos.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you're going to use data to make a decision and you put that into your lesson plan, and then you're going to do some small group interaction, all of that goes in your lesson plan, but then the video would be the small group interaction and remediation teaching on a subject based on something that maybe they blew a quiz or something, or a test or something. So yes, it does, but it goes back and forth. But almost, since you are going to be lesson planning each time,
Mhm.
those elements are going to, they'll repeat every video, every observation. Don't get me wrong. They should be used, but there's only so much time and there's a lot of things to see. So if your lesson planning is pretty much on par and you're using data, for example, where and when you need to create that lesson plan, those are going to be givens. We're really not going to touch that too much. But most of this is going to come from your observations, or the uploaded videos that you're recording.
And then I have one more question that I can think of.
Okay.
So, you know how we pre-meet, I do the video, and then we meet after, right?
Right. Post-conference.
So when I send you the lesson plans, do they have to be like the formal WGU format?
Well, it can be in that format, or it can be in the format that your host teacher is using. Either way.
Because I thought I read for something, like there were like a couple times where it has to be that WGU format, but I don't remember what it was.
Whatever it is, my preference is that it be consistent. So if you want to use all of WGU's lesson plan templates, that's fine. Can just use that for the 6 lesson plans that we're going to be observing.
Okay.
If you want to use your host teacher, do that. But back and forth can get a little bit confusing, at least for me, because I'm watching for certain things based on what we talk about in our post conference. And then that way I can find it in that format. So you know, choose whichever one you want to use, but we'll stick with that once you start.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing too is you'll see in there's some classroom management issues. But we typically don't try to stage that, but what we do try to make sure of is that if those issues come up, like if students aren't paying attention, or students are sleeping, or if students are off task and they're talking while you're talking, that you are able to address those elements ahead of time. One thing that most of my student teachers end up kind of not doing real well with at the beginning, and I'll just give you this forecast, is always get their attention on you. Make sure that this is very lockstep, I'm making this obvious. When they are quiet, then speak after they're done talking. A lot of times my student teachers will say, okay, everybody, we're ready to go. And meanwhile, they're still talking, and you know, they'll wait for 2 seconds and then they'll keep talking about what needs to be done. And meanwhile, half the class is still having their own conversations. That right there it's a classroom management piece, but it's also structure in making sure who you are, and as far as the information that you're going to be imparting. So that's something that I would really recommend that you really focus on. Another thing is making sure that your host teacher and you discuss how you're going to run the class. So if your host teacher has 5 preps, pick a prep, and you can use that one throughout the entire student teaching experience, or you can change them up. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes to start out with, maybe the honors classes or the higher end students are going to be easier, but then maybe as you get a little bit more confident, you want to go to a class that maybe doesn't have such high flyers in it, which would give you a little bit more of an experience level. It doesn't matter to me as long as we're going to be able to meet those competencies. Now, if you have a class that they are 100% on task, focused, you're not going to get classroom management pieces in there, because there's just not going to be the students that like to mess around enough to give you that opportunity to try and make that build that skill set. So make those decisions accordingly. But back to what I was saying is, whatever class you choose, I expect that you will give them expectations at the beginning of each of your lessons on what you need to have them do, not do, and what you're expecting them to accomplish in the lesson. So for example, if your host teacher has her set of processes and procedures, get in front of the class when you start the recording and reiterate those. Make sure that those students understand that your expectations are going to be the same or different. You, whatever that looks like, you communicate that to your students in your first observation recording, because there's going to be, you're going to be the new adult in front of them, and their minds are still on the host teacher, but then you show up and they're not going to know what to think or do. I mean, what are you expecting of me? So you may not get any problems, but that expectation statement and that presentation rather is going to be really important. And you should do that anytime you teach, whatever the expectations of the lesson happen to be at that time and day. But the first thing you want to do on your first video at the beginning of that is to set the expectations of what you want, whether the same or not, from your host teacher, of what you're going to be doing while you are student teaching. And then you would just reiterate that and then do in expectation statements for each lesson as you progress. Because a lot of students will just go, oh, okay, this is fun. I don't need to worry about this because this isn't for real. She's not my real teacher. No, you are, but you need to tell them that. And that is part of what your expectation will be when you are a real teacher. They do that every day. So get in the habit and making sure that you set that expectation. I want everybody in their seats when the bell rings. I want your materials out on the left side of your desk, water bottles on the ground. I need you to make sure that you're watching the video or watching the bell ringer, writing it down in your journal. And then I give you 5 minutes and that journal gets turned in over here. And then you come right back to your seats. So, you know, just those standard things that you may not always pay attention to need to be outlined to them. Okay. That's something that a lot of my student teachers forget to do because they're wrapped up in trying to teach their lesson. I've got only so much and I've got a ton to do. So here we go. We're going to get started. Well, nope. Take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, set the expectations. Another thing that a lot of my student teachers forget to do is what I call real-time assessments. So in other words, if let's say in your lesson, you're having them do a project and it's a complicated project where they've got to have their computer when they're doing some research and they're working in a group and they've got to do some reflections and fill out a worksheet of some kind. You want to make sure that number one, you get their attention. And then as you're explaining, all right, we're going to be using computer, pencils, and paper today. You're going to be working in groups of 3, and then you're going to be doing some research on the topics that we talked about yesterday. And in order to do the research, you need to do da-da-da-da-da. So that's a lot of information. And if you just spew that at them, they're not going to remember it. So you'll need to say, all right, you can give them a bunch of the directions, and then you can say, okay, Sally, what are we doing first? And she's going to say, well, we're going to go to lunch. Sorry, Sally, we're not going to go to lunch yet, but Juan, what are we doing? Oh, we're going to use our computers. We're going to need some paper and pencils, and we're going to be doing some research. Awesome job. Okay, Juan, what are we doing afterwards? Oh, well, we're going to complete the form. So as you're giving them those instructions and directions, you're going to want to chunk it and give them questions and have them repeat it back to you. That way, you know, they've got it and you don't get 10 of these. Yes, I don't know what we're doing. Can you help me? I really don't know what we're doing. What are we doing, Fred? I'm not sure what we're doing. Let's just pretend like we're looking like we know what we're doing. And then you end up having to spend all that time reiterating what they're doing. So you get that little sampling of making sure that they understand what they're going to be doing. Then you release them to whatever it is you're explaining. For example, that's going to be a lot of challenging because you have a lot going in your mind. Chunking that information will be important, especially when you're giving directions or if you're doing direct instruction for any length of time. Their brains just don't absorb it. So little pieces at a time. Okay. All right. So is there anything else that I can answer for you?
No, that was it that I could think of.
Okay. It can be overwhelming. So don't think that you're going to have to do everything all at once. You do chunks of it. And then it may be that you repeat some of those things. Real-time assessments are not just a one-time thing. That's going to be done throughout. Classroom management, That's a hit or miss. It may be throughout, it may be a handful of times. So it's in each of the observations. It may not always be measured. I mean, it'll be measured, but it may not always be part of the instruction. Things like that. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the generic set of examples and explanations of some of those things. Once you start in on this, you'll start to see that there will be a flow. So typically what I do is in your Go React, I give you the comments. You'll be able to see those. They have the date and time stamp on them. I copy and paste them and put them into a Google Doc. And then at the top of each of the Google Docs, I have what's called an area of focus. And those are going to be the areas, kind of like your shopping list, if you will, or your checkoff list of the standards and the competencies from the instrument that we'll be looking at. So let's say in your first observation, real-time assessment wasn't really prevalent. There were some classroom management issues, and something else happened. So on your list, we'll say on observation 2, we're going to focus on classroom management, real-time assessments, yada, yada, yada. And it could be as many as 5 or 6 things. But it just has to be a sampling of, we have to still accomplish those things. And then they'll roll over if they aren't seen, and then they'll go into each list with the idea that you won't have anything to do in observation 6. Sometimes what I've had, just a second, is that some of my students have finished everything, and then in observation 6, for example, they get to choose what they want to focus on.
Oh,
see what I mean? So
yeah,
some things like that.
Which
other
that
times,
the area of focus thing will help, because not having like something to think about instead of like, oh, I'm just doing all of these things, like I think that'll help me hone in on things.
Yeah, and occasionally I will send you a video or an article to read, and you're not required to read it, but it's supplementary in the event that, like, real-time assessments, that's a big one. I send that to practically everybody multiple times over student teaching. And it has ideas. They usually have ideas that you can read and adapt, or tools that you might want to add and use later on at some point in time. So what I can't give to you in real-time comments, I try and supplement with some materials to review as well. So there's that as well. But really on the day-to-day, on the ground experience, that's your host teacher. But I will send you occasionally some things and some links to supplement what it is to what I'm talking about, and how you might be able to improve upon it next time. That's all. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Looks like we're ready to go. You've got your Go React link. I'm going to reach out to your host teacher and your principal probably in the next, probably this weekend. We start school at my school tomorrow. So I still have a ton of things I still have to do tonight to get ready for that. So, but I will take care of reaching out to them over the weekend.
Okay.
Okay. And if you have any questions that come up between now and the time you start, because you know what you need to work on as far as your draft outline, your schedule of when you'll be doing your observations and that kind of thing. And then that way, if anything comes up in between time, let me know. And then we will then start on your pre-conference 1 by sending that lesson plan to me. We review it, and then we go from there. So another thing is Go React does not tell me when you have uploaded your video. So you would actually have to send me a text or an email saying, Go React is observation number 1 is in Go React. So just that's a little bit of a manual remembrance that we'll have to do, but I'll remind you to do that when we talk into pre-conference. Okay. All right. So if anything comes up, let me know. But outside of that, are there any other questions that I can answer for you?
No, I think I'm good right now anyway.
Okay. Let me stop the recording. Are we done? All right. What'll happen here is this thing will cook and it'll let me know. No, stop recording. It's still going. All right, here we go.